This program contains adult content.
Is there a God?
Big atheist.
Really?
What, am I an idiot? Come on.
That yes, it would be nice if you could throw your sins and your responsibilities on someone else. But it's not true.
It looks like far-left lunacy.
I don't believe that it's true that religion is moral or ethical.
You don't need to follow anybody!
It's not human intelligence!
If someone doesn't value logical consistency, what logical argument are you going to give them that will demonstrate that they should?
Hello and welcome to the Godless Rebelution. Today is Thursday, September 30th. This is episode 352. My name is Dan Ellis and I am joined via remote connection by two awesome co-hosts, Mr. Ryan Duffy.
Oh, I'm awesome? Cool.
I think so. I think you're pretty spectacular, man.
I was hoping you were talking about me.
Mr. Not Ryan Grin, Mr. Taylor Grin. How are you doing, man?
Double credits for Ryan. I see how it is.
There's just so much Ryan to go around, man.
There is.
What has been going on in your life for the last week?
Well, I might have found a kind of venue I might be able to go try to sell some wares at and try that out for a little bit here, hopefully in December and January.
Oh, yeah?
Sarah found it for me, actually. It's at the Monarch in Ogden. It's like an art exhibit type place, but year round, they're going to start having little bazaars for artists to come in and sell their wares.
Oh.
So I'm trying to make some stuff to sell there right now.
A bazaar of bizarre things?
Actually, that's kind of how they're framing it, because a lot of people, like, their stuff won't be accepted into other farmers markets because they're like weird and like
eclectic.
So like
unique.
Here we don't, like, if you got stuff you want to sell, we'll take you. Like, we don't care what it is.
Yeah.
If you want to sell a bunch of skulls, come sell a bunch of skulls.
Please.
I like weird shit. I may need you to go around taking some photos.
Okay.
It's like, I would hope that they would have some kind of disclaimer up front, like, please no Confederacy stuff, no Nazi stuff. No.
I'm pretty sure the groups that go there aren't flowing in that direction.
Oh, good. Because that seems to be having a bit of a heyday or resurgence lately.
Yeah. It's not a Trump rally.
Yeah. Well, that's cool. That's exciting. You said that's December, January?
So that's when I have those Sundays off. So in December and January, I have weekends off again. So I'm going to try to get some stuff put together that I can hopefully get a spot to go there and try it out.
Oh, very cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
How about you, Mr. Gran?
Mixed. I'm really excited about the thing that we did that we're going to talk about in the B block.
It's so cool.
I am a little bit bummed. Our kitten, we talked about this a few months ago. We adopted the kitten, and it tested initially positive for FIV. And we let the person that we adopted the kitten from know that, and they went and got the rest of the litter tested. And all of them tested negative for FIV. So good. We were hopeful that it was a false positive with our kitten, and it was not. We found out yesterday. So he does have FIV.
Where would he have gotten it?
His mother is pretty much like, he just got the bad luck of the litter and did inherit it from his mom. Well, not inherit it, but it was passed to him by his mother.
Yeah.
Which sucks. It means that, like, not on a leash, not for cool Instagram photos on the beach will he ever be allowed outside. And then we've got to be very careful about like what we feed him, about him going after like table scraps and stuff. And we'll actually have to be really careful if we ever choose to get a dog, because he's going to be really, really susceptible to harm from parasites, and like foreign infections and that kind of thing. And we're going to get avocado tested too, to make sure that he hasn't gotten it from the kitten. And we've got to make sure that the kitten never bites him hard enough to do a spit to blood transfer that might get avocado that. But he's also a really good kitten. So we're keeping him. We're going to take care of him, all that jazz. And like, he can live a long, fairly healthy life. It's just that when he starts to go, it'll be like a fairly catastrophic, quick, rapid decline.
Yeah.
So just something we have to know. But like, if you're ever thinking of adopting cats, especially if you're thinking of adopting a single cat, like, you can adopt a cat with FIV that will be like healthy and happy for almost all of its life, you know. and better off than just being put to sleep as a kitten. If you're in a place, listener, to do that, and then just, be willing to do the humane thing when it does reach the end of its life, and put it to sleep before it starts to suffer, is the other thing. Like be willing to put the animal before yourself. When
do the difficult thing.
Yeah.
Well, and it's interesting because we're moving into Halloween month. So the kitten you've adopted is a black cat. And I've heard a couple conflicting things about the adoption of black cats. I've heard that black cats are often adopted around this time of year, and that shelters and places like that need to keep a watchful eye out because of people doing nefarious things with black cats. And I've also heard the converse, that black cats are not adopted as often because they are black cats.
I'll make a note to look into that.
Okay. Yeah, it was just out of the blue. I didn't know if you'd heard anything about it.
I've heard that with dogs as well.
Yeah.
The black dogs are harder to adopt.
Strikes me as being like one of those satanic panic kind of things, or like like razor blades and candy. Like it just has that same
vibe.
Yeah. So I'll look into that.
I've heard it where they use them as a prop for Halloween. Like, okay, Halloween's over with. We don't need our prop
bunnies
anymore
around Easter. Yeah. Well, apparently I found out from my neighbors that our cat has become semi-famous in the neighborhood because we've got a cat tower that's at the window next to my office, which faces our street. And apparently people will look at him as they walk by because he'll sleep in that tower and just look out on the street. So I'm trying to figure out a good window display that I can come up with for Halloween.
Like an actual castle on the outside.
Yeah, or something like that.
Well, you've got those bat wings that looked pretty awesome on him.
He hates them so much. I've never seen a cat's ears just
instantly
so much.
Instantly flatten against its head.
Yep. Yeah,
it's funny.
Now you really look like Toothless. Yeah.
How
have you been?
Good. Just super busy. I have also been walking a lot more. That's fun. I got the treadmill and been doing all of that. And golfing with my electric golf cart. That's been awfully fun. Though on Tuesday when we played, our tee time to start is at 3:30. And by the time we were trying to wrap up 18 holes, like we got 16 holes in, and then it was just too fucking dark to play the last 2 holes. Like we had to break out our cell phones and we're using them to navigate our way through the fairway back to the clubhouse, because it wasn't just like twilight or dusky. Like it was fucking dark by the time we got back to the clubhouse.
Dark. Yeah.
Hey, Bill, stand on the green with the flashlight.
I purchased a 3:30 reservation tee time for the men's league this year, and we're hoping that if we show up earlier that we'll be able to get out. And this time of year less people start showing up, so that's a possibility, but it might not be doable.
I don't understand how there isn't like a fairly popularized movement at this point to end daylight savings time.
Oh, there should be. Absolutely, because it's dumb. Like
it's an arcane. Yeah, it's no longer needed.
Yeah, well, and I would hope that if it is ended, that we maintain the time we're on now. Like I like having it light later in the evening or later in the afternoon versus being light.
I hate how it gets dark at like 5 o'clock in the evening.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And it's ridiculous.
That's going to happen in a month. So
yeah,
I hope that changes. And then other than that, it's just I've been doing a lot of really good work at work and I've been noticed. Senpai has noticed me. And so
I wouldn't have expected that reference from you, Dan. I'm not going to lie.
And so I've been asked to do more work at the division level, up from the branch level at the division level. But that's going to be in addition to my regular duties where I was already so busy. So I'll be working a ton of overtime again here for the next little while. That's going to be consuming a whole bunch of my time. And so I'm not looking forward to all of the work, but it is nice to be recognized as being a good employee and known as somebody who can pitch in to help out with a bunch of other stuff. So that's good. But what I'm very excited about this week is that we've wrapped up a fantastic, awesome so good interview with Mr. Andrew Seidel of the Freedom from Religion Foundation that was just amazing. And Taylor did a fantastic job during the interview. It was so good. It was such a great interview. He's such a good interviewee and thinker and just knows his shit so well inside and out and is awesome to have on the show. I was so excited about it.
There were a few questions where I was like, I don't know if I should just like throw this out on the fly, and his ability to just like, no, I've given that some thought. Like here's some people's names, here's some stuff that we've done research on. It was like, it was just a blast.
Yeah. So having said all of that, without any further ado, I'm going to just take a little break here. And on the other side, we'll drop you into the interview that we had with Andrew Seidel on Christian nationalism.
Hi, everybody. This is Mikey Weinstein. I'm the founder and president of the Military Religious Freedom Foundation, and you are listening to the Godless Rebelution.
I'm so sorry to hear about you splitting up with Miss Melissa. Though I do suppose that means you'll be looking for a basket to bid on tonight.
Oh, no. Wait, what basket?
Well, tonight's the annual picnic basket auction to raise money to buy books for the library.
And replace the ones the Reverend's wife burned.
Rejoining the Godless Rebelution podcast now.
All right, folks, I am ecstatic to introduce Andrew L. Seidel. He is a constitutional attorney, director of strategic response with the Freedom from Religion Foundation. He has a bachelor in science and neuroscience and several law degrees, each of which with academic honors and awards. Did we miss anything there, Andrew?
No, former Grand Canyon tour guide's kind of fun, but
big fan. I'm from the Southwest.
Yeah. But that's good.
Yeah, and you've got your first book, The Founding Myth: Why Christian Nationalism Is Un-American. And apart from my textbooks in college, I don't think I've ever written so many notes in the margin of a book.
Oh, man, no, I'm thrilled to hear that. That is honestly, for me, that's the best compliment I can get for that book as an author. In the before times when we weren't battling a politicized pandemic, and I would go travel around the country and do book talks, I would get such a kick out of the people who would bring their books up with tabs and all the dog ears and all the notes and the highlighting. Like that just to me that's the stuff I love. Yeah, I love to see it. So I'm glad.
Yeah. And I plagiarized a little bit from your book, took from it quite liberally in a mini series that we did very recently on Christian nationalism.
But you were credited.
You were credited. I'm being silly.
I mean, the goal is to get this information out there, to rip apart the myths that underlie this truly un-American identity and, work to hopefully stop it. So I'm all for it.
No, that's fantastic. And that took you, 10 years to write? It was a labor of love, wasn't it?
Yeah, it really was. It took start to finish. So start to publication, it took about a decade. I initially just kind of was doing it, for my own personal interest. And I thought it was going to be a law review article, a short, maybe 10, 15,000 word thing. And the more I worked on it and the more I did and the more I researched, it kept kind of getting, there was just more there. And I was talking with Susan Jacoby about it, 5 or 6 years in. And I've been thinking about self-publishing. I'd been thinking about letting FFRF publish it. And she said, no, you just got to take this and you got to try, and I'll help you get an agent. I'll introduce you to some publishers and I'll write the foreword if you want. And so all of that happened. And then it was just, kind of a way to the races. And once that happened, it was actually a reasonably quick process, but I had just been kind of poking around on my own for a while. And then she took me under her wing, and I owe a lot to her.
That's fantastic. I want to make sure that our listeners, we're going to include a link in the show notes, but I want to make sure our listeners can seek out that book at the place that's going to be best for you. So where would you direct, listeners to find a copy of that book?
Well, I would encourage everybody to order the new paperback that is coming out. So they stopped printing the hardback, and the new paperback drops sometime in November. So you have to wait a little bit. But get it wherever you get books. I like to direct people to bookshop.org. That supports your local bookstores. It's kind of a really cool website to order any book from, but please go get a copy of The Founding Myth. But yeah, go pre-order the paperback because it's got a whole brand new epilogue, all new information about January 6th and the role that Christian nationalism played in that insurrection. Okay. Probably worth getting even if you've got the hardback and it's well tabbed and annotated.
Well, and speaking of that connection between Christian nationalism and January 6th, the Freedom from Religion Foundation is hosting their 44th annual conference in Boston this year, which listeners you can go to as long as you can show proof of vaccination. It's going to be from November 19th to 21st, and you are presenting on just that, Christian nationalism and January 6th. Would you be willing to give us a little bit of a sneak peek about what you'll be covering in that speech?
Yeah, so I'm doing a little workshop on Christian nationalism, and it is going to focus on the role that it played in January 6th. The subtitle of The Founding Myth is Why Christian Nationalism Is Un-American. And it's not often that you choose a subtitle for a book and then the subject runs out to prove you right in like the grandest, most ridiculous way possible. But that's what happened. I mean, Christian nationalists attacked American democracy. They attempted to overturn the results of a free and fair election, and they proved beyond all doubt that Christian nationalism really is un-American. Mm-hmm. And for a long time, the identity underlying Christian nationalism. Well, first of all, I guess you did a mini series, but just for people who might be hearing this for the first time, Christian nationalism is basically the idea that the United States was founded as a Christian nation. They were based on Judeo-Christian principles, and that we've strayed from that foundation, right? We've gotten away from those roots, and we have to get back to those godly roots. Otherwise, we're going to fall into decay. Mm-hmm. And for a long time, that was treated as a historical debate. Are we a Christian nation or are we not? And it never really was. And the fascinating thing for me about January 6th is that Christian nationalism ripped off its mask that day. Mm-hmm. And it showed that it was not this scholarly debate about how America was founded, but a violent exclusionary movement that is bent on seizing power in the here and now. And I mean, a few of us scholars have been kind of having that conversation in this sort of like side street, Andrew Whitehead, Catherine Stewart, Sam Perry, Robbie Jones, Chrissy Stroop, Sarah Posner, Michelle Goldberg wrote about it back in 2006, Jack Jenkins and Jeff Charlotte. And then the January 6th kind of pushed that into the mainstream for like a little while. But already you can see the country seems to be kind of forgetting about it. I, however, have been just immersed in just this world of shit since January 6th. I have been scouring photos and videos and court cases, and just dipping your toe into that world is really alarming, but I'm swimming in it. And I am more convinced now than ever before about the role that Christian nationalism played in attacking our democracy. I mean, just think about that day. Did everybody watch it? Did you guys all watch it on?
Oh yeah. I was watching the live streams while like on my lunch break at work and stuff, just playing. I'm like, this is.
I was cooking breakfast and my brother comes into the room and he says, "Hey, are you watching TV, the protests?" And I was like, "Nah, man, like it's just a bunch of impotent right wingers." And he's like, No, they're like storming the Capitol. And the last time that I felt like I did on January 6th was 9/11.
Mm-hmm. Me too. I felt very similar feelings. I watched in horror as the assault unfolded. But just think back and you didn't see, unless I saw on the floor of the Senate, I saw this guy parade the Christian flag onto the floor of the Senate, live. And that for me was a big signal. I already knew how much Christian nationalism had played in the Trump movement. But I was blown away when I saw that. Yeah. That guy, by the way, the guy who carried that flag, rifled through senators' desks, took photos of their stuff, is still at large. Don't know who he is, has not been captured. Go ahead.
No, please go ahead.
I was just going to say, think back to the other things that happened that day. Like Paula White began that rally with a prayer. And in true Christian nationalist fashion, she actually added the United States of America to the Lord's Prayer that is written down in Matthew 6. So she added this prayer that, according to the Bible, Jesus himself wrote.
Right.
Let me just go ahead and change that and throw America into that. It's also in the same chapter of the Bible where Jesus tells people not to pray in public like the hypocrites do. Never mind. So she's praying, but and Trump ends the rally with the call to march to the Capitol, and his last words were the same that Nixon used to distract the country from Watergate. God bless you and God bless America. That's the first time it ended a presidential.
Right.
There were impromptu worship concerts that broke out on the short walk to the Capitol. The Proud Boys knelt in prayer. They were hailed as God's warriors. And the prayer was just full of typical Christian nationalist rhetoric. Yeah. So they marched and then they attack. You don't have to look very hard to see it. A lot of the imagery is now infamous, right? There was that huge wooden cross that was juxtaposed with the gallows. If you look closely at the gallows, they actually signed it like it was a yearbook. Hang them high, in God we trust. God bless the USA. Hang for treason. Amen. You saw the signs, in God we trust. Jesus saves. Jesus 2020. There were Bible verses, more crosses. One of the signs that stuck with me, that I didn't see on the day of, but when I've been swimming in this world, is I am on your side, God. Right. And that really is, another guy, as he was charging up the stairs and into the Capitol, holds a Bible up over his head, like it is a battle standard or some Napoleonic eagle. There's so much from that day. So to circle that back to your question, I'm recounting a lot of that in the epilogue of the Founding Myth, but I'm also going to talk about that, and show some videos and show some photos during my presentation at the FFRF convention. And I can't be more specific than this right now, but there is going to be a rather sizable reveal on that front coming up, hopefully in the next month, but we may have to postpone a little while. We're going to see. I can't be more specific than that, unfortunately, right now.
No, I get it. And when you can, we'll be keeping an eye out for it, but make sure to let us know and we'll be happy.
I think if you're following Christian nationalism, I think will be a hard thing to miss when it happens. But yes, I will certainly shoot you an email.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah. No, I'll be looking out for it. And I'm looking to attend that conference myself. So hopefully I'll see you there. Hopefully I can get one of those paperbacks while I'm there. So,
and I just learned something new. Like I didn't have any idea that they were signing the gallows that they had erected there, and a lot of the other imagery that you just mentioned in particular, people holding up, Bibles and stuff. It's I can't think of any more harmful or destructive animating force than believing that the all-powerful creator of the universe has, instructed you or is on your side in your righteous crusade to bring the country back to him. That's terrifying.
And that is what this is. And if you listen to remember they gave a prayer on the floor of the Senate. One of the guys afterwards said, we consecrated it to Jesus. That to me was the ultimate statement of where we are in this movement. And he's not wrong. It is a statement of where they are in the movement. Yeah. Another insurrectionist who was there for the prayer said, I just wanted to get into the building so that I could plead the blood of Jesus over it. That was my goal. And he spends 40 minutes recounting how Jesus told him to do this and Jesus told him to do that. And this dialogue that he had with God as he's attacking the Capitol. Yeah. One of the more famous insurrectionists, you might have even seen this video if you were watching that day. I think it kind of went viral either that day or the next day. She had a Trump flag tied around her neck like a cape, and she's sipping this post-assault Coors Light, and she's doing the selfie video, and she says, "To me, God and country are tied; they're one and the same. We were founded as a Christian country, and to see how far we've come from that, we are a godly country founded on godly principles." Yeah. And that's literally exactly the thesis that I'm destroying in the Founding Myth. Yeah, and it's the central motivating force of Christian nationalism. You rarely get such clear statements on it, and they were everywhere that day. Well,
and it reminds me of Jason Stanley's writing on like the heralding of a mythologized past as one of the key pillars of fascist movements. Yeah, and there's that. It's funny to me, not funny, but it's really interesting to me hearing you talk about that. Because there are elements of the Christian nationalist iconography that I hadn't seen that you've talked about here about January 6th. I've written a little bit about how the intelligence community in America, especially counter-violent extremism researchers, aren't paying enough attention to white supremacists and Christian nationalists. And I was listening to a podcast, Intelligence Matters, yesterday, where they were talking about having done statistical analysis on the people who were involved with the January 6th insurrection. Yes. And it was really funny to me because they were trying to figure out what caused, quote, ordinary people to become violent extremists overnight. And then the interviewer, who was a member of the intelligence community, said, how can we extrapolate this and use it to understand why, global Muslims might end up becoming Islamic extremists, right? Because that's a global issue. And I couldn't help but facepalm and think, well, if you only understood the way that Christians could become Christian nationalists and extremists overnight.
They're so close to grasping it.
Yeah. And they just can't seem to get it.
Just missed it. Oh,
yeah. I was talking with Luke Mogelson, who's a journalist. He was the one who shot the footage for the New Yorker that kind of blew up after January 6th that they published. He's the one who captured the prayer on the floor of the Senate. And I was talking with him about this, and we were talking about how all of the there were so many different disparate groups there. QAnon, the militia groups, the 3 Percenters, the Oath Keeper, all these different, and they seem to be just so what united them. And to me, the answer was obvious, and Luke was saying, it never occurred to me, but it was so clear being there that day that Christianity was the uniting factor.
Yeah.
That Christian nationalism was the umbrella that tied it all together, basically. And it's like, that's exactly what it is. I mean, that's why they had statues of Jesus and the Virgin Mary over their heads running into the Capitol. That's why the QAnon portrait of Jesus was paraded with them. I don't know if you saw this. Is Jesus with his red MAGA hat and the QAnon stuff. Yeah.
And that's Matt Shea kind of stuff.
And Ryan, your point. I mean, actually, I don't know if it was Ryan, but whoever made the point about the terror of God being on that side is, I mean, that is the central message that they hammered day after day after day from election day up to January 6th. I mean, they really, really did. I mean, right, Trump looked up at the sky and said, I am the chosen one in an interview. And it was just treated like it was no big deal. That is going to lead to this. One of the attackers who kicked in Pelosi's door, saying he was going to tear her into little pieces. He's actually an attorney, which is sidebar. But at one of his hearings, he recounted, he said, God is on Trump's side. God is not on the Democrats' side. And then this is what he added, which is a perfect illustration. And if patriots have to kill 60 million of these communists, it's God's will.
Holy shit.
Yeah, which is crazy.
Yeah.
Now, when I look at this, obviously Christian nationalism has been around for a while. But I kind of view Trump as the catalyst for it. He's the one that basically, like you said, all these groups had one thing in common. And he kind of got them to come out of the shadows and bring these groups together in a way. So do you think this would have happened without Trump? Or
that's a really good question. So there have been waves of Christian nationalism throughout American history. We saw a big one in the lead up to the Civil War. Which incidentally is when we got In God We Trust on our coinage. Saw another big one with McCarthyism, right around that same time, which was, and both of these I recount in the founding myth. And then there are more frequent and also more frequent waves of Christian nationalism that kind of died a little bit quicker, basically almost every decade since 1950s. It's hard to pinpoint what is. I think you're right to call. I think the word catalyst is actually a very good way to describe it, because there is a feedback cycle that occurs with Trump. Basically, he's like a mama bird that absorbs all of their grievances, chews it up, and regurgitates it back to them in this form, and then they feed off it, and then you kind of get this sick sort of cycle that they feed off each other. I don't think Trump tapped into Christian nationalism in a way that we hadn't seen, but it was already there under the surface.
Yeah.
If you look at Whitehead and Perry's studies, basically a quarter of the country are like hardcore Christian nationalists. And that was there before Trump. I think that, the Tea Party movement, it had a pretty big strain of this.
It gives me real Charles Lindbergh vibes, to be honest, from like the 1930s.
Oh, yeah. Sarah Churchwell wrote a great book on this. I think it's Behold America. The name is escaping me, but she's basically tracing like the America First rhetoric through the last century. And there are a lot of overlaps. If you want to do the red string thing, there are certainly a lot of overlaps.
Yeah. So one of the questions I've had for quite some time is, aside from like the fairly typical like donate money to XYZ group that is performing advocacy, right? Like the FFRF. What can the average person do to oppose Christian nationalism, whether at the local level, national level? Like what can average listener do to help?
It's a really good question. And a few things jump to mind. One is to not let it slide. I think for a long time, the myths and the claims of Christian nationalism just went unchallenged and uncritically accepted. In part because of what I was talking about at the beginning, they were kind of treated as like a historical question. Oh, we'll let the historians figure that out, which the other side is not doing. And they've now been able to build up an entire identity around this disinformation. And so I think we really do have to work to counter the disinformation. I think that's just one of the key things. And so when you hear somebody say this, on Facebook or on Twitter, wherever you are, don't let it go unchallenged. You see it on an article in the Washington Post or your local paper, like write a letter to the editor and respond and explain why that's not accurate. Because the entire identity is based on lies and myths. It really is, but it's also validated by modern representations of the myths that those previous waves of Christian nationalism that we were just talking about have imposed on the country. Things like "In God We Trust," things like "One Nation Under God," which is one of the reasons I think it's so important to fight back against those. Anyway, so that's one thing. Just don't let it pass by unchallenged. And the second thing is, I think, going back to what you were talking about, Taylor, with that podcast, the Intel podcast, and they couldn't make the leap from the fact that Christians could be extremists, right? We as a society have a mental block that doesn't let us think of Christians as possibly being bad people. The good person is synonymous with Christian in the American psyche. And that is a huge problem for our ability to just see what is actually happening.
Right.
And one of the best things that you can do as an individual to combat that is to be an open, proud, unabashed non-believer. Whatever label you choose to call yourself. I call myself an atheist. I'm also an agnostic and a humanist, all these other things. But don't be shy about calling yourself that. And tied to that, and that really is probably the easiest, most important thing that anybody out there listening can do. I really do. I think that's the best thing you can do for the secular movement as a whole, is to just come out of the closet. But tied to that is, don't engage in this sort of Christian supremacist framing of, well, real Christians wouldn't do that. Real Christians and fake Christians, right? Like real Christians would never storm the Capitol because real Christians are good people. That's nonsense. And you're buying into it, and you're doing the work of Christianity for it. You're doing the public relations work of Christianity. So, really, we absolutely have to reject that. Those are kind of some of the big, easy things I think that an individual can do.
Hello, I'm Lloyd Evans. I'm a former Jehovah's Witness. I'm the author of The Reluctant Apostate and senior editor of jwsurvey.org. and you are listening to the Godless Rebelution.
Oh, come in.
Morning, boss.
Oh, hi, Ted.
Yikes. I haven't seen someone that disappointed to see me since I wore a red baseball cap to a Planned Parenthood fundraiser.
Thank you to everybody who has rated the show on iTunes and Stitcher and are following us on YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. And to all our Patreon patrons, you make the show possible.
Okay. I want to make sure that we have enough time, but I'd like to ask you a little bit about an act that, correct me if I'm wrong, the FFRF has endorsed. It's being put forward, I want to say, by Jamie Raskin, the Do No Harm Act.
Yeah, the Do No Harm Act. It's a really important bill. So to understand, we have to go back to 1993, and Congress passed something called the Religious Freedom Restoration Act.
RFRA.
RFRA. So, and actually, let me just say too at the outset here, I have a new book coming out next year that is tentatively titled Weaponizing Religious Freedom. And it's all about how this Supreme Court is redefining religious freedom from a protection into a weapon. So that's
fantastic.
Religion. I'm really excited about it. The manuscript's going to be due in about 62 days, give or take. Not that I'm counting.
Who's counting?
And I get into a lot of this, and I have the history of RFRA and the case that preceded it, and how there's sort of this crazy confluence of events that led to RFRA. But anyway, the Religious Freedom Restoration Act essentially did this. It redefined religious freedom to give people exemptions from the law. If you have a sincerely held religious belief about X and the law says X, you don't have to do it. Basically, this is an oversimplification, and I'm not going to get into those silly legal tests, but that has also been weaponized. The Hobby Lobby case is the best example. This is what most people are most going to be familiar with, right? Mm-hmm. Hobby Lobby sued under RFRA to say the public company that the Green family owns, or excuse me, the privately held company that the Green family owns through a series of trusts does not have to provide contraception coverage to its employees because God. Yeah. So, and that is where you see RFRA was probably, for the most part, for most of the people who supported it at the time, meant to be, it had good intentions. It was meant to be a pushback on the Supreme Court, but it's been completely weaponized and turned against. And you get things like the Hobby Lobby case. The Masterpiece Cake Shop case is very similar, though it was not brought under RFRA. It was brought under the First Amendment. But anyway, the Do No Harm Act would fix that problem with RFRA. It would essentially say RFRA cannot be used as a way to discriminate. Religion does not become a justification to harm religious minorities or women or non-believers or LGBTQ folks. And that's what the Do No Harm Act seeks to do. It's a good step in the right direction. However, we don't need RFRA. RFRA should be repealed. That is the real solution here. We don't need it because we have a First Amendment, which already does a pretty good job of drawing the lines for protecting religious liberty. And RFRA pushed it too far. And once I call them the Crusaders in the new book, realized the power of RFRA. They really tried to take it and run, and you get cases like Hobby Lobby. Yeah. And now what they're trying to do now is take that same understanding and graft it onto the First Amendment, which is why you're getting cases like the Masterpiece Cake Shop. Yeah. Gay wedding cake case. Yeah.
Yeah, or the Philadelphia adoption case and
Fulton. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. I mean, the simplest way to say this is religious freedom has never, ever in the history of the United States been an excuse to harm the rights of somebody else. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And this makes perfect sense, because to allow that is to say that your right to religious freedom is more important than their right to X, Y, or Z. And that's not what we have in this. We don't have a hierarchy of rights with religious freedom sitting at the top of the pyramid and everything else below it. But that's exactly what we are seeing Christian nationalists and this Supreme Court trying to do, right? You're going to get religious freedom at the top of the pyramid, then probably the Second Amendment right below it, and then fuck all your other rights. We don't care.
Yeah. And I've always been frustrated at even little cases where like religious lines of thinking are given a higher priority than other lines of thinking. You know, when I was in the military, it was pretty frequent that, Christian individuals would regularly be scheduled off on a Sunday. Yeah. And if you had a good reason to be off on a Sunday, but it wasn't a Christian reason to be off on a Sunday, you wouldn't be looked at with any sort of priority, or even like if you think of school lunches, if you're a Christian or if you're a Muslim and don't want to eat pork, right? But if you're a vegetarian, for the same reason, you might not be given any sort of exemption. So,
yeah, I start getting into that at the end of the book quite a bit.
Oh, good.
And I mean, it's a really good point too. And it pops up in the military context a lot. And originally, actually, the cases that are sort of seminal in that point are the Welsh and Seeker cases. And basically, you could be exempted from the draft if you belonged to a pacifist religion. Mm-hmm. If you were raised a Quaker, it was really be easy to get exempt from the draft. But if you had taken the time to read and understand and developed a deeply held philosophical objection to warfare, that was not given the same rights. Though I think looking at those two beliefs objectively side by side, like I think one we should value more than the other.
Yes.
One is imposed and indoctrinated, and one is arrived at through rational, logical thought and education. Like one of those is better. And we don't treat that one as kindly as we do the other one. And the Supreme Court did eventually do the right things in those cases. But it really, I point them out to highlight the dichotomy that you're talking about there.
Well, and it's really funny to bring up the Quakers. If I were to say in the military, I have an objection to this because I'm a secular humanist, right? Yeah. At the side eye, but the secular humanists are endorsed by the Quakers. And if I were to say, oh, well, I'm a Quaker, suddenly I would be given better attention. It's silly. Yeah. Okay. So I have another question, presuming we have time. That's kind of off in a different direction. The Guardian put out a article today that we'll call it an activist organization has leaked a membership list for the Council for National Policy, a group that you talked about in your book, The Founding Myth. And it shows an alliance between Christian nationalists, far-right nationalists, and mainstream GOP members. It had big names on it like Tim LaHaye, Frank Gaffney, Tony Perkins, as well as people like Jerome Corsi and Charlie Kirk, and Reince Priebus, right? Some fairly mainstream figures as well. Talk to me a little bit about this. This group.
I mean, we knew a few of those names. Tim LaHaye is the author of that just god awful Left Behind series that has plagued our country with terrible movies.
I remember when I was a kid, my dad gave me a Tim LaHaye book that was like basically the Myers-Briggs test, but Christianized. And it was 2 layers deep of bullshit. And I'll never forget that.
Well, so Tim LaHaye is one of the granddaddies of Christian nationalism. He's also written a ton of books about how this is a Christian country and all the founding fathers were Christian. Yeah. And Christian nationalism is not solely about religion. It's this unholy alliance. I think I called it an incestuous marriage in the Founding Myth of conservative politics and conservative Christianity. And you have groups like the Council for National Policy sitting at that nexus. And there's really, we don't know a lot about the CNP. I can't remember. I think it might have been ABC said it's one of the most powerful organizations you've never heard of. Mm-hmm. It is a shadowy, powerful cabal. I mean, the word cabal kind of was invented to describe the Council for National Policy. Yeah. And I mean, it was founded by Tim LaHaye, and its membership role has been secret. until apparently today. So I'm planning on diving into this later on. But its mission statement was to restore Judeo-Christian values under the Constitution, right? That is a clear Christian nationalist statement. So it's not new. This is new information, and it's good that it's being exposed because they're operating in the shadows for a reason.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. And then I think that gets back to, if any of our listeners, we'll include a link to the article in the show notes. And I think that's one of the places where your listener can kind of not let it slide, like Andrew said. Yeah. And if people bring up, any sort of thing about corruption in politics, make sure to bring up groups like this that are engaged in active corruption of politics through things like the National Prayer Breakfast and the Family and other such organizations. Yeah.
And there's really good information coming out too about National Prayer Breakfast. Jonathan Larson over at the Young Turks Network. He's an investigative journalist who worked for MSNBC. He's done a lot of really interesting stuff in the past. He also got some basically membership roles and people who attended some of the National Prayer Breakfasts and who they invited, things like that. And he's been publishing a series of articles on the prayer breakfast lately that are really, really fascinating and worth your time as well.
Thanks for pointing that out to me. I have not followed the Young Turks for a long time because of Sank's shenanigans. Yeah. But at that recommendation, I'll go give it a look.
Yeah, he is. Jonathan Larson is. I don't know. I don't really understand the network either, but he seems to be more of an independent reporter. He's appeared on their programming, but this looked like legit journalism to me. So.
Okay. I'd like to ask one more question.
Go for it.
Narratives are really important. Yeah. And a lot of the Christian myths are taught to kids in school. I have asked peers just out of curiosity, and none of them have said that they haven't. Sorry for the double negative. Seen the picture of George Washington praying, right? And they're taught that at a young age. Do you have any recommendations? And if you don't, that's fine. This question's kind of out of the blue for what humanist or otherwise secular parents can provide as counter educational tools to their kids. Are there kid level educational tools?
That's a really good question. And especially, I presume you mean specifically about U.S. history, because it's just really cool stuff. There's some really cool sciencey stuff out there. But it doesn't seem that the niche for U.S. history is being filled at all. And I think that part of it is because we have the truth on our side. We're not trying to indoctrinate like the Christian nationalists are, right? We're just go read a real history book. Don't listen to the liars.
I guess the problem is depending on whether their book comes from Texas or California, right?
No, you're 100% right to identify it. And I'll say I've been asked a variation of this question quite a few times now. And I think I'm at the point where we're going to have to look and talk with the publisher about possibly doing something with the founding myth at different levels, different either grade levels or maybe even something for really young kids. But again, not with an eye just towards some people say this. Here's what really happened.
Right.
Because the Washington praying in the snow at Valley Forge, it's crazy. And this was one of the favorite parts of the founding myth that when I got to research and write it, I just really enjoyed, because we know where that myth comes from. You can identify it and trace it back to a single individual, a parson, right? A religious leader named Mason Locke Weems, who was this itinerant preacher who published ridiculous, intentionally bombastic pamphlets, including anti-masturbation screeds and stuff. Did not give a damn about being truthful. All he wanted to do was sell stuff. That was all he cared about. Whatever he can include. So in the don't quote me on this number, but it's in the founding, in the 30th edition of his hagiography of Washington, he adds this story about Washington praying in the snow at Valley Forge. And it's 30 years or more after the event happened. There's no primary sources. It didn't happen. We know
it's like the Bible.
Happen. Yeah. We know it didn't happen. We know it comes from a disreputable. This is the same guy who did the myth about George Washington chopping down the cherry tree and then not being able to lie about it. We know. And yet there's a stained glass window depicting this falsehood in the U.S. Capitol, in the prayer room in the U.S. Capitol, which was built in the 1950s during that wave of Christian nationalism we were talking about. So, it's frustrating because we know that it didn't happen, and yet still it has been adopted and pushed and pushed and pushed. Mm-hmm. I go over a bunch of these in the founding myths. So help me God. Is another one being said by presidents as they're being sworn in. You can trace that back to Washington Irving, who wrote Rip Van Winkle. Like this guy, he invents fables and myths. That was what he did.
Right.
Well, and you just mentioned that, we had a prior wave of Christian nationalism. Is this something that you think will just come in waves? Like, what ended the first wave of Christian nationalism, or did it actually end? Is it just a continuing slide into that?
Yeah, it sort of subsides, but it's still there. The problem is that it leaves, detritus behind. So, all these myths that we've just been talking about, Washington praying, so help me God, in God we trust, all of that are, you can pinpoint those to previous waves of Christian nationalism, but then they're left behind. And I think part of the reason that we're seeing more frequent waves and more powerful waves of Christian nationalism is because they're not having to do a lot of that identity building work. They can point to all of the relics and artifacts that were left behind by these previous waves and say, no, see, look, we're a Christian nation. It's on our buildings. It's on our money. Mm-hmm. We say it every morning in schools. And all of a sudden, the argument is much easier to make. Mm-hmm. And they've undone the idea of America as, the first nation to create a separation of state and church, to create a secular republic. One of the things I like to point out is that, America is a shared idea, and Christian nationalism refuses to share. It excludes non-Christians and the wrong kind of Christians too. So America will never be a Christian nation, because the moment it becomes a Christian nation, it will cease to be America. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Those two things cannot peacefully coexist. One will triumph. So that is the choice that we face as a nation, right? Christian nationalism or America, because we really cannot have both.
I have a thought that occurred to me. It's kind of arcane. And so if you as a law talking person can say there's no there, right? Then feel free to swat it down. But it makes me think about our kind of co-founding with France, right? Mm-hmm. Because we were very intertwined at our founding and at their revolution, and their principle or philosophy of, and I'm going to butcher the French, but laïcité, I think is how it's pronounced.
Laïcité, yeah.
Thank you. Is there anything we can learn from that, right? Is there any writing that we can look to for that?
Yeah. I jotted down a couple months ago. I'm working on weaponizing religious freedom, but I jotted down a ton of ideas about just the historical relationship of America and France, because it's so fascinating, and it goes beyond just our founding and their founding, and Lafayette and Washington to
Franklin,
but even you can advance, even the history of flight. Like the Wright brothers have these really fascinating ties to France. Anyway,
television too. Yeah. No, sorry.
No, it's okay. The point being, it was one of those moments where you just this is a whole thing I got to write it someday. So I have a list of those. That,
okay. I'll bother you about that again.
Most of them won't get written, but laïcité is, it is separation of state and church, but it's more active, in a way. It is, I think it crosses a line that we have here in America to more actively suppressing religion in the public sphere, versus, the American principle would be the machinery of the state cannot be used to advance religion in any way, shape, or form.
Right.
But we allow it out in public. You can go to the town square and kneel down and pray, but the government can't give you a microphone to do that. France laïcité is a little bit more stringent, and that comes from their concept of individual rights and freedoms being a little less maybe robust than ours, or different. Actually, not robust, less individualistic, I think is the way that I would say it. But it's a fascinating, and a lot of smarter people than I have written on this already. So
I might bother you offline about maybe some of those works to read. Yeah. Is there anything today that you want to talk about that we haven't thought to ask you about?
No, but I'm happy to come back on anytime you guys want to do this. This is a fun conversation. It's a really nice way to break up the middle of the workday for me.
We'd be happy to have you on anytime, especially as you, are able to announce this next project. When Weaponizing Religious Freedom comes on, if any big events happen that is your area of expertise, we'll be happy to reach out to you.
Yeah, and if you guys ever, if you want me to come on and talk legal stuff, or hey, what's that Supreme Court doing now? Screwing up now? Yeah, absolutely. Come on, so just let me know. Yeah, I'm happy to do it.
Make me keep feeling bad about not going to law school.
I think they said our Supreme Court is at one of its lowest levels of trust right now. I can't remember. They said since the 1950s or 60s,
since they started asking that question.
Yeah.
A self-inflicted wound for sure.
Not even close to as low as it should be.
Right. We're no joke. Dred Scott levels.
It is absolutely terrible. This is not an impartial partisan. No. That Supreme Court that you learned about in your high school and middle school classes, does not exist.
And it's a completely self-inflicted wound. Like this is all brought on by the justices who are serving on the bench.
But it was done deliberately, though. Right? I mean, like Mitch McConnell did not steal seats to just put an impartial justice on the court that he liked better than somebody else. Right. He did it to put an activist on the court that would enshrine minority rule. Like they packed the court on purpose.
Yeah. Right. So
the question isn't like, are we going to pack the court? The court has already been packed. What are we going to do about it? Is the question.
Right. Well, and the justices that are most extreme were appointed by the two presidents in history who did not win the popular vote and really got through on electoral college bullshit.
Man, you guys are going to love the new book. I gotta say. Yeah, I'll leave it there, but yeah.
All right. Fair. Well, thank you so much, Andrew Seidel. If anyone wants to go to the FFRF convention, it's in Boston, the 19th through the 21st. You'll be giving a workshop there. Listeners can pick up your book, The Founding Myth, at bookshop.org.
Wait till the paperback, or buy both.
Wait for the paperback.
Pre-order the paperback would be my preference.
Yeah, and hopefully I'll see you there at Boston. So
yeah. And if anybody, if you're listening to this and you have a follow-up question or anything like that for me, I'm pretty reachable on Twitter. I'm also on Facebook and Instagram, though I don't ever check those messages, but I'll respond probably on Twitter. Andrew L. Seidel at all those places. So
cool, awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Gentlemen, it was my pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Hi, this is Allison Gill. I'm Vice President for Legal and Policy for American Atheists, and you're listening to The Godless Rebelution.
Hey, Tina, we've got a problem at the registers. They're not accepting coupons.
Didn't you get that email? We're only accepting digital coupons now.
What?
Zephyr's just updating things a little.
It seems crazy to change something that's working.
Excuse me, do you have gay iPad cases?
Yeah, in electronics. Have a heavenly day.
Wait, you didn't hear about that either?
What?
Oh, today is fun for me. Zephyr's asking that we no longer use the term heavenly day.
What?
Yeah, there was a memo. They feel it's a little loaded.
Yeah, it's loaded with kindness. It's the same thing as saying have a nice day or have a good day.
Great, then say one of those instead.
If you have questions, comments, concerns, compliments, corrections, criticisms, or concepts for content, contact the show via email at godlessrebelution@gmail.com, by text or voicemail at 330-81-REBEL, or Twitter the twatter at TGR Podcast. Thank you!
What a fun interview, man. I had so much fun during that. It was so cool. He's such a great interviewee, and like I said, before we dropped everybody into the interview, it's just so refreshing to talk to somebody who knows their shit inside and out and can run, 100 miles in any direction you want to set them off in, because his knowledge is just so wide and deep about so many different things.
Which just means
it was definitely one of those cases of oh, go ahead.
So I was to say future opportunities to talk to him again.
Yeah.
There's so much more out there.
Yeah. It was definitely one of the positive examples of meet your heroes. 'Cause all the authors that he was, talking about during the interview is like, oh, I've read that book. I've read that person's book. I know the person's book he's referencing. It's like, I get to like hear this stuff from the horse's mouth. Like it was just really cool for me.
Well, and you did such a great job during the interview as the interviewer. Like I know that you're a huge Andrew Seidel fan. I am too. Like I think his, work with the FFRF is amazing and important. His book is fantastic. He's a great debater and he's a joy to talk to.
And that's the thing, like almost more importantly, he's a good communicator and he has a fantastic ability to take complex or arcane things and make them accessible to people who are not as well educated as he is on the subjects and make them feel like they're able to consume that information without being like talked down to or like they're sitting in a lecture. Like he just makes it conversational in a way that's rare to be able to do. So that's fantastic. That's part of why I like his book so much. Cause like you could toss that book on a high schooler's desk and they'd get it.
Oh yeah. Well, and there were so many points, while he was answering questions and everything that I wanted to jump in with another question, but at the same time, I didn't want to jump in and push anything off the tracks because it was all just going so well and the answers were so fantastic that by the time we got to a lull in anything, it was like, oh, well, that moment is past, but I'll have to keep it in mind for when we have him on the show next time because.
Oh, I've got an entire like sheet of notes over the course of that interview where I was like, okay, look that person up later or make sure to come back to like, it was, that was a blast.
Yeah. I had a really good time in that interview. That was just so much fun to listen to all of his answers and also kind of fucking terrifying at a bunch of the different.
That's true. It's kind of hard to be that excited about like how close we are to Christian fascist takeover of the government. But here we are.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm really excited. I'm putting in a PTO request as soon as we're done with this episode and I'm going to do everything I can to be at that convention in Boston. So any of you guys want to go as well, listeners, try to let us know in advance. And I should be able to say by next week's episode if I'm going to be going. And if I am, like, feel free to holler at me if you're there.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. And I'm going to check my schedule and everything too. It may be a little difficult, but it's the end of the month and apparently federal employees are still completely unaware of whether we're going to be working tomorrow or if the government is shutting down or if the government is still shutting down, but we're going to be working anyway without pay. So,
yep. Well, I do have an update from 7 minutes ago that the Senate has passed a shutdown avoidance bill and they're sending it to the House.
Oh, good.
Well, I mean, yeah, but now it goes to the House and it'll be just like normal. Nope.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's a stopgap that goes till December 3rd.
Okay.
So, good. So then
historically, the country has been pretty good at stopgaps.
Yeah.
I know there's been a couple stopgaps already that they haven't voted on. It'll be the same thing. It'll go till the fucking 12th hour and then they'll finally vote on something.
It'll go until the Democrats can find and are willing to use dirt on Manchin and Cinema to get them to actually play fucking ball.
Well, at this point, I just, this is going to open up a whole can of worms that we don't have to discuss, but I don't understand why the fuck they're doing what they're doing. It doesn't make any sense to me at all unless they want to try to maintain this air of
the short version is this, and it's actually something I've been wanting to do, like an article or an episode or something like that on.
Yeah.
America has a unipolar political system now.
Mm-hmm.
Republicans have coalesced around this dark allegiance of Christian nationalism and corporate shilling, basically. And that is what the Republican Party is. And all other special interest groups that in a sane country might not be aligned must align themselves under the banner of being a Democrat in order to acquire any political power at all. And in a parliamentary system or in a system where Republicans weren't fascists, these groups might be otherwise aligned. Like, because of the Catholic influence, you might see more Latinos, for example, aligned with Republicans than Democrats. But because Republicans are so virulently racist, they align themselves with Democrats, right? People like Kristen Sinema and Joe Manchin would definitely be Republicans if Republicans were sane, right?
Yeah.
And so you've got people with very disparate agendas and values uniting under the big tent of the Democratic Party, because the alternative is or proto-fascists.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I get that. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense in the sense of them.
Excuse me. Sorry.
You're fine. Of them.
I'm so sorry.
Of them, ostensibly being elected to represent the people who voted for them, and the people who voted for them overwhelmingly are in favor of the reconciliation bill and the Build Back Better stuff. Like it.
Yeah.
Everybody, all of their constituents of note who would be reelecting them are in favor of them passing this. And it's.
Yeah, but if you think about it in terms of like so Manchin, right? We've got new financials on him, right? He makes about $500,000 in dividends from a coal-based energy company that he started in I want to say either 88 or 98. I'm going to say 98 if I recall correctly. He started this coal-based energy company, turned over ownership of it to his son. His son still runs this company, and Manchin calls that a blind trust, which is just as much a blind trust as when Trump turned the Trump organization over to fucking Beavis and Butthead. And he makes $500,000 a year from selling coal. And the current legislation for the 3.5 trillion, secondary element of the infrastructure bill includes new restrictions on coal, a lack of federal funding towards coal, transitioning away from coal. So for him, it benefits him more to leave office and continue making coal money, having killed, strangled the infrastructure bill in the cradle, right? Than for him to continue in office, and this change not having happened. Because if he stymies this infrastructure bill at this point, it could be another decade before Democrats get the chance to do it again, because of the way that control of Congress tends to swing back and forth. In the long game, it's a smart move for him. It's just also the corrupt move for him.
Well, that was not happy news.
I'm sorry, man.
It makes me feel like the whole thing may come down in House of Cards. I don't know. We'll have to see how it progresses.
The smart thing for Biden to do would be to, under the table, lean on the Department of Justice to continue looking into Manchin's corrupt connections with that energy company and like basically insider trader stuff with regards to his policy that he's worked in Congress, vice the, interests that he has that are a conflict of interest, and basically say like, I can make this legally painful for you. And you can call me out and say, oh, Biden is leaning on the Department of Justice. He's just like Trump, yada, yada, yada. But like, I'm already going to be losing points anyway. Right. If this infrastructure bill doesn't pass. So
if my agenda isn't pushed through, then it doesn't fucking matter. So,
right. Yeah. So I'm going to make this as painful for you as possible. Try me. Right. That's what he needs to do.
Well, let's just hope that the entire country isn't flushed down the shitter for $500,000 in coal money every year.
Yeah, well, I mean,
they've probably done it for less.
Oh, absolutely, they've done it for less.
Why don't we get some of that George Soros money going to Manchin's pocket and say, I'll replace your either that or Bloomberg, who spent hundreds of millions of dollars on a failed fucking presidential campaign. Kick some of that toward Joe Manchin.
Protest paycheck.
Yeah, kick some of that toward Joe Manchin to get him off of his ass and help the world at large.
Yeah.
Anyway, we've run out of time. Before we go, though, I want to make sure that we thank our Patreon supporters.
Alan Firth.
Don't be a Richard.
Hunter Grin.
John McCullough.
Ollie Olson.
Sinead Duffy.
Steve Kuno.
Stephen Andrews.
Tiffany Hudson.
Vanessa.
Corey Ebert.
Jeff Peterson.
Jeremy Goodson.
Matthew Sanders.
Megan Mitchell.
The guy that asks questions before he finishes the show.
Alex Jones, Gay Frog Brigade.
Utah Outcasts.
Wesley Aaron.
Freethinker 215.
Janet Uter.
Purple Dragon.
Sarah Segovia.
Savita Kuna.
Ted Sellen.
Tim Jacobson.
Trisha Weir.
A noble spirit embiggens the smallest man. A perfectly cromulent statement.
And James.
Thank you
see why I wanted to go third?
Thank you all so very much for your donations to the show. We really appreciate it. If you, dear listener, would like to become a Patreon patron, you can do so easily by going to patreon.com/GodlessRebelution, where you can contribute as little as $1 per episode. And that entitles you to such things as early releases of episodes, bonus episodes, extended outtakes, clips from the cutting room floor, all kinds of fun stuff. So we would like to see you over there. If you are averse to giving your money over to Patreon to then in turn give it to us, you can send us money through PayPal using our godlessrebelution@gmail.com address. Thank you very much for everything. Thank you guys for joining me tonight.
Oh, yeah.
I'd like to thank Andrew for being such a fantastic guest. I look forward to having him on again in future episodes. He's a joy to speak with and listen to.
Yeah, that was an absolute blast.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I got to get back to it, guys.
Yep, me too.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
I'm going to go eat pizza.
All right. We'll talk to you later.
All right.
Bye.
Kush cloud all in my head. Woke in the morning with a hoe I didn't know in my bed. Walked to the mirror, saw my eyes bloody red. That's the evil I said, but I shouldn't really feel that. Instead, block out the feedback. Yeah, we don't need that. I'ma show you where the fucking drinks and the weed at. When the beat bangs, this shit gon' blow your weave back. You gon' have to run this shit back for a recap. Yeah, I'm right back, hit a recap. Vic up on your bitch ass, I'm doing it quick fast. Sorry for the mishaps, I just spaz. I'm liable to break a bitch off like a Kit Kat. So sit back, I'm gonna need you to relax. You gonna have to kick it like you relapse. You better believe that these beats get these bitches on their knees stat. That's my feedback. Fresh talk to 'em. The weed mad loud, man, you might need a gas mask. Bitches in the bathroom cutting lines like a fast pass. Pass that's a couple cats, a little pissy drunk. Pass that's me and Fresh with a drink in our cup. Yeah, all I ever wanted to do was hit the blunt, cause I couldn't see it fucking me up. But now I'm crossfaded, the vibe is fading. It's cool though, I'm adapting, my mind is changing. The bar places to be, I'm in the spot, you see. So it's already like I won the fucking lottery. I gotta be out of my goddamn mind to let it happen to me every goddamn time. And if I'm the fucking outcast like Big Boy and 3 Stacks, I still block out the feedback. Talk to him. Fresh talk to him. Talk to him. And if I'm the fucking outcast like Big Boy and 3 Stacks, I still block out the feedback. Talk to him.
I had a friend in high school who during football gave himself the nickname of Xena Warrior Penis.
That's such a good fucking hash name. I'm writing that down.
Yeah.
Holy shit, that's good.
How am I coming in here? I got a little bit of a new setup that I'm just trying out, which I realized I should have done before we did this. Do I sound okay? Yeah, all that sounds really good. And the last name is Seidel.
God damn it, Dan.
We even talked about that. Seidel to the bar for a drink.
I'm so sorry.
No, don't worry about it at all. I honestly don't care. Most of the time, I think I don't even bother to correct people because I genuinely don't care.
No, we literally had like a 5-minute discussion on how bad I am with names before the show, like with me repeating your name over and over, and yeah,
as soon as you hit his name in the question, I was like, "Oh man, we just fucking talked about that." That's hilarious.
I'm so sorry.
No, don't worry about it at all. Yeah. It's not. I am not a person that ever takes offense to that. I'm working on weaponizing religious freedom.